Okay. Let me remind you how we got here. Chapter 3 was entitled Encumbrances to Real Property, right? Anything that burdens real title. There is no way that you're going to take a test on real estate and not be tested on the word encroachment. Okay? So let's give you a definition to start with on encroachment. Let's give you a working definition. Then let's move on from there. An encroachment is an unwanted intrusion from one property onto another. An unwanted intrusion from one property onto another. The way our bullet point describes it, of course, improvement that extends past the property line. You already have that in your notes, so no reason to write that down. An unwanted intrusion from one property onto another. Now do yourself a favor on encroachments. Just start naming some very common encroachments. Fences by far have to be the number one. My neighbor builds a fence, he either accidentally or purposely puts it on my property, it's encroaching onto my property. What are some other common ones? Landscaping, yeah. I mean, think about landscaping in a couple of ways. You literally could have put your landscaping on my property, or think about it, my airspace. Your trees may be growing into my airspace. That can cause an encumbrance on the property. How about sheds, outbuildings, things like that? Very, very common as well. Driveways and parking areas and stuff like that often end up being encroachments. So this is a common thing that you're going to run into in the field on a regular basis. Now, let me ask you this. Here's an important question. How are encroachments discovered? How are encroachments uncovered? The survey. With a survey. You need to make sure you have that relationship. How do I uncover an encroachment? I'm going to advise my client to get a survey. You know what? I'm going to advise my client to get a survey on literally every property except maybe a condo. Okay? Think about it. Even on a townhouse, even though it's a small little piece of land, I'm probably going to recommend that they have a survey on that. And here's how strongly I feel about this. I'm going to recommend, client, I think you should get a survey on this. Bless you. I want you to be sympathetic to clients. Think about buyers. When they look at what they're spending in a transaction, they may say, oh my gosh, I'm getting a zero down loan, a USDA loan or a VA loan. I'm getting a zero down loan. That's great. I don't have to have any money. Yeah, you need to spend some money on these tests, these inspections, these surveys, these appraisals, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to spend some money. Every once in a while, the buyers will try to cheat out. Oh, come on, Chris, it's only a quarter-acre lot. What could possibly go wrong? Do I really need a survey? My answer and your answer should always be, yeah, you need a survey. Okay, pay for the survey, it's well worth it. And then, I feel so strongly about it, if the client says, I don't want to get a survey, I'm going to have them acknowledge, we have a form for this. I'm going to have them acknowledge that I recommended you get a survey. And you're going to initial right here that you chose to waive your right to have a survey. That way, that's my get out of jail free card. If something comes up later and they say, well, why didn't you recommend that I have a survey? I did, and you signed, seeing showing that I recommended that survey. Okay, survey is very, very good. For a few $100, it can save you thousands of dollars. Let me give you an example of one that one of my agents ran into. It was that fence. It was that fence. And what happened was, a seller was selling their home. The buyer has a survey done. And what they discover is the fence is like 18 inches over the property line. 18 inches. And this is a half-acre property. They're each half-acre properties. So at the end of the day, it's not a huge encroachment, but it is in fact an encroachment. You don't have a right to build your fence 18 inches over on somebody else's property line. So here's what the seller says. The seller said, oh gosh, that's my neighbor. We've been neighbors for years. Let me talk to them about it. They won't have any problem with the fence. The seller walks over to talk to the neighbor and says, look, can you just sign this encroachment agreement saying you understand that my fence is on your property and you have no problem with it? And the neighbor said, your fence is where? Okay? And they were buddies up to this point, but now all of a sudden you're trying to take part of my property? So the neighbor said, no, I'm not going to sign that encroachment agreement. I want your fence off the property. Now listen, a lot of times it's one of those just little slapboard wooden fences. It costs a couple $100 to move, not a big deal. But that wasn't the case in this one. This one was actually a wrought iron fence ensconced in concrete with a brick fascia. it ended up costing over $3,000 to move, and this was several years ago. And so that buyer who did a $350 survey ended up saving themselves potentially $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in the future. I'm absolutely recommending the survey. You can do it or not, but you're going to sign right here that I gave you good advice. Whether you chose to do it or not, it's up to you. Disclosed by personal inspection and a location survey. I have to be real careful about the personal inspection. There's no doubt on my property. If somebody asks me where my property line is, I only have a quarter-acre lot. There's no doubt that I could point down the side and say, look, my property line runs right through this utility box, right to that flag back there in the back. I'd probably be pretty correct, but I'm not going to do it. Because if I do, and they rely on that information, and it turns out I'm wrong, now I'm liable. Let's let the surveyors deal with this. And the bottom bullet point is important. You will see why when we get to the offer to purchase and contract. It says that the seller is delivering fee simple. Have you heard that word before? Fee simple, marketable title. You haven't heard that word yet, but marketable title means the ability to sell the property under normal conditions. Fee simple, marketable title under a general warranty deed, which you will talk about later today. All right? So if the properties are not marketable, it could affect their value in the marketplace. It is your responsibility to maintain the integrity of your property lines. Buyers, you need to do surveys. Sellers, you need to protect your property lines. Okay? You're going to get questions right on encroachments? Please do. Have some examples in your mind as you go into the exam. I expect you to do extraordinarily well on that. In the category of encumbrances, this is where property taxes also come up. Property taxes. Notice that the page that I skipped was just simply a drawing of an encroachment. It showed a building that was over the property line. Property taxation. I expect any of you who own real property are completely aware of this. Every year, you end up having to pay your taxes. They are a burden on your property. Your local taxes are responsible for running your local municipality. Remember we talked about how important they were? Do you remember that if there's a foreclosure sale, I might ask you a trick question here. Are you ready for a trick question? If there's a foreclosure sale, do you remember what the first thing that is paid at a foreclosure sale?
Attorneys.
The attorneys are paid first, but that's not a lien. That's not a lien. And then the question, if the question is what's the first lien that's paid, then the answer is always your real property taxes and assessments. Do you remember the word special assessments as well? Okay, so we're putting together a little bit there. Property taxes, clearly an encumbrance on your property. Now, having said that, there are a lot of little bullet points that I need you to know about taxation. And fortunately, none of them are hard, but it's a lot of memorization, okay? So in talking about property taxation in North Carolina, you are taxed on a local basis. Your real property taxes run your county and your city if you live in the city limits, okay? Be aware that there's also a little cheesy question at the end of chapter 3 having to do with taxation, and it says you live outside the city limits, so watch out for that without tripping you up. If you live outside the city limits, you don't pay city taxes, right? But you do pay county, because everybody in North Carolina lives in a county, okay? So even though you pay locally, even though you are taxed locally, there is a state act that governs local property tax collections. Please write that down. The Machinery Act is the state, and I'm saying capital S state, the state of North Carolina. It's a state act that governs, it's kind of like sets the rules for local tax collections. I don't know really that you need dramatically more than what is on the slide there, but it's another one of those M words, so be prepared to study all and know all these M words. The Machinery Act is the state act that governs local tax collections. It sets the parameters, it sets the calendar. Okay, let's talk about that calendar just real quick. Here's one of the things that the Machinery Act says. Your property must be revaluated, I'm saying valuated as to establish a value of something. Your property must be revaluated at least once every 8 years. It's called an octennial appraisal, okay? Your property must be revaluated for tax purposes at least once every 8 years. Machinery Act says so, okay? At least once every 8 years. Could it be done more often? could be done more often, it can't be done less often. Now, typically, it is done once every 8 years. Do you understand why? Revaluations are massive undertakings. What the county has to do is go out and do an appraisal on every property within their borders. Okay, so this is a massive undertaking to do this. It's rare that it happens more than once every 8 years. Some places do a little bit more, but typically it's once every 8 years. Here's another important point for you. As you're preparing for the exam, remember sometimes words are used very, very specifically. This is one of those cases. You are taxed based on your assessed value. Please write that down. You are taxed on your assessed value. If you didn't pick up on it, the word you're underlining is assessed. You say, I've got it, Chris. You said it 4 times already. I think I have it. Well, let me make sure that you do. We may try to trick you into thinking that you are taxed on your appraised value. Are you taxed on your appraised value? No, you're taxed on your assessed value. What's going to happen to your appraised value over the course of 8 years? It's going to change. Similarly, are you taxed on your market value? No, you're taxed on your assessed value. Then why would we try to tempt you into thinking market value? Here's why. Every 8 years, when your property is reevaluated in North Carolina, your value should be pegged at 100% of market value. Okay? So let's say we did an assessment this year, 2018. We're not in Wake County, but let's say that we are. What the county is trying to do is figure out the market value of each of your properties at that particular time. But then once they set your assessed value, what's going to happen with your assessed value for the next 8 years? It stays the same. What's going to happen to your appraised or market value? It's going to go up or down. You with me? We may also try to trick you into thinking that you are taxed on your sale price. Are you taxed on your sale price? Not your real property taxes, you're not. Okay, you got it, assessed value, and it's going to change probably once every 8 years. The Machinery Act also sets the timetable. The timetable. Let me tell you quickly what the timetable is for tax collections. However, I will let you know then what the most important dates regarding that are. All right, January through the end of the year. According to the Machinery Act, you should list your property for tax purposes in January. Do you remember in January going down and listing your property for tax purposes? Probably not. I didn't. The reason I didn't is because my property is automatically inventory. Nothing changed on my property from last year to this year. Now, if I had added a bedroom or something like that to the property, I would need to make sure that they had the improvement with the tax office. But if nothing changes on my property, it's automatically inventory. I mean, this is the 21st century. All of this is computerized now. Makes sense? Okay, but in theory, you list your property in January. Now, what happens is, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but by the end of June, typically in June, you start hearing the municipalities talk about budget battles. What are we going to spend money on? How much money do we need? The reason for that is it's the end of the fiscal year and June 30th, so the budget has to be prepared for the next fiscal year. Okay? So that's why you hear so much wrangling in June. How much do we need to run our local government? Okay? And that's always a tricky time because you're probably talking about a tax rate increases. Okay? So anyway, by the end of June, they're supposed to have the budget put together so that the tax bills can go out July 1st. Actually, they normally go out August 1st. Your tax bills usually go out sometime at July to August time frame. I just brought up a potentially testable point. I don't know if you call it. Property must be reevaluated for tax purposes at least once every 8 years, but how often can the tax rate change? Yeah, every year. Every year, the city council and the county commissioners get together and they just determine their budgetary needs. The way they determine their budgetary needs is, here's the budget. Here's what we have in inventory. Here's the value of all the properties in our municipality. Let's take that budget, let's take this inventory of value, let's divide that into the budget, and it will spit out a rate. If everybody pays this much per their value, then we will in fact be able to meet our budgetary needs. They solved that by June. They send out sometime in July or August your tax bill. Here comes the most important thing that I have said about taxation. Are you ready for it? Real property taxes are always due on September 1st. Your real property taxes are always due on September 1st. Victor, when are your real property taxes due? September 1st. September 1st. Let's try it again. Daniel, when are your real property taxes due? September 1st. Good, good. Erica, when are your real property taxes due? September 1st. Virginia, have I asked you yet? When are your real property taxes due? September 1st. Your real property taxes are due September 1st. You got it? Now, why am I beating this into your head? One, because it's important. But now, by a show of hands, show me how many of you actually pay your taxes on September 1st.
Yeah.
Nobody pays their taxes on September 1st. That's when they're due, but nobody pays them on September 1st. Do you know why you don't pay them on September 1st? They're not considered late until January 5th of the following year. If you will simply pay them before January 5th of the following year, they will not be charged any penalties or interest. Do you know when I always pay my taxes?
January 3rd.
December 30th or December 31st. And here's why. I want to pay them as late as possible without incurring penalty, right? And I want to write them off of this tax year, income tax year. Okay? With the change in the tax laws, you may actually change the way that you pay your property taxes because the standard deduction has gone up so high now. Some people will pay their taxes so that they pay twice in 1 year and none in 1 year to maximize their ability to deduct. Little tricks like that that you might determine. What's the most important thing I said? When are your real property taxes due? September 1st. I don't care that that's not when you pay them. That's when they are due. Okay? We will use that number a little bit later. Now, let me mention this to you as well. This is an important point. Your real property taxes constitute a lien against your property as of January 1st of the tax year. Do you see that I'm going backwards? Your real property taxes, they weren't even due until September 1st. They weren't even considered late until January 5th, but they were a lien against your property. I need you to be specific about this. On January 1st of the tax year. To me, to be quite honest with you, that's kind of semantics anyway. Because remember, real property taxes always have a priority lien, don't they? But if you want to know how it's written, that your real property taxes constitute a lien on your property on January 1st of the tax year, long before you ever got a bill, they were a lien against your property. It's what we refer to as an involuntary lien. We didn't ask whether you want a lien on your property for taxes. You just got one. And you can't even pay it yet because you don't get your bill until sometime in August. Okay? That is the tax calendar. January 1st of the tax year and September 1st are the most important of those days. And then remember, it's not considered late until January 5th of the following year, after January 5th. Okay? Let's see, what else does the Machinery Act say? Let's see if this is all there. There's a timeline. And if you want a picture of the timeline, there's a picture of the timeline. Let me stay here for just a moment. I'm going to throw in one other vocabulary word, although to be honest with you, I don't think it's that important for tax purposes. Do you know one problem with valuating properties at least once every 8 years? It's a long time. It's a long time. Property values could change dramatically over that 8 years. So counties have it within their rights to do what's known as a horizontal adjustment. The word you're writing down is a horizontal adjustment. Horizontal adjustment. Horizontal adjustment. Now, a horizontal adjustment can only occur on the 4th year of an 8-year cycle. A horizontal adjustment can only occur on the 4th year of an 8-year cycle. And you understand, based on its name, a horizontal adjustment goes something like this. You know what? Everybody's property value has gone up dramatically. So let's raise, instead of doing a full revaluation, let's just take and raise everybody's assessed value by 10%. Do you see anything controversial about a horizontal adjustment? Yeah,
The county can be really large depending on an area that didn't have that much growth down there.
Yeah.
Have a higher tax rate.
well, not tax rate, remember what we're changing is the tax value.
That.
But what you say is still accurate. Not all parts of the county are going to appreciate at the same rate. So if they just reach across the board and raise everybody 10 or 20% or whatever, there's some people who probably went up more than that. But there's some people that are probably stagnant. They're like, wait a minute, this has affected me just like it is the people that have been in the area of greater appreciation. Be like the difference between, I mean, think about it. Cary and Knightdale are in the same county, but they have appreciated dramatically different ways. Okay? So horizontal adjustments are rare, but they are legal on the 4th year of an 8-year cycle, according to the Machinery Act. You with me? Here comes a trick question for you. Here comes a trick question for you. How often can a horizontal adjustment be done? I didn't ask for the definition. I asked how often can it be done?
Every 8 years.
Can you explain, Brad, why it's only every 8 years?
Because it's the 4th year of the cycle, the 8-year cycle.
So on the 4th year of an 8-year cycle, and then what happens on the 8th year of the 8-year cycle? Then you're reevaluated, and then theoretically they can do one in the next 8-year cycle. At the end of the day, I don't know that you're going to need to know that much about horizontal adjustments, okay? Don't stay up late at night studying horizontal adjustments.
So is it every 40?
It's actually every 8 years. You can only do, it's on the 4th year of an 8-year cycle.
I understand.
There you go.
You said that was on a county level.
Take it.
You said it was the county.
Yeah, so what happens is the county kind of calls the shots, and then if you're in the city limits, you would follow the same rules. The county and the city will have different tax rates, okay? Special assessments, we talked about these the other day, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on special assessments, but do you remember that a special assessment, I refer to it as a tax levy for a one-time improvement? And I suggested that what you study is the difference between what your real property taxes pay for, which is basically your municipal services, versus what special assessments pay for, which are mostly going to be things that were like add-ons. In other words, sidewalks, area lights, paving a road, etc. Yeah.
Special assessment is the same like yearly assessment?
Well, see, a special assessment doesn't happen on a yearly basis. It happens on an as-needed basis. And once you pay for it, it's done, okay? Your real property taxes, they're forever, but special assessments. And remember this as well, special assessments only affect the people who benefit, or the properties that benefit from the amenity, okay? And look in your book and it'll give you some examples of things that assessments pay for versus what your real property taxes pay for, okay? All right, I think we're at the end, so let's do this. Let me shut this down for just a moment. We're going to do a little bit of math. This is going to be kind of an introduction to math. And how do you feel this morning? Are you feeling pretty energetic? Are you feeling pretty energetic? Okay, because this is going to be tough. We're going to accidentally go from something very easy to something very, very hard. Okay, so I want to make sure you're up for it. We started off with just a simple conversation about taxes. That wasn't difficult, was it? You might want to know the formula for solving for taxes. So let me tell you what the formula for taxes in North Carolina is. The formula for calculating taxes in North Carolina is going to be AV, which stands for the assessed value, divided by 100, times the tax rate equals your annual taxes. Assessed value divided by 100 times your tax rate will give you your annual taxes. Let's try it. Let's try it real quick. If I were to tell you that your assessed value was $200,000 and your tax rate is $1.20, and remember, on both of these, it's because I said so. I'm completely making these numbers up. So your assessed value is $200,000. Your tax rate is $1.20. Does it make sense? You're going to take 200,000 divided by 100. Clearly, you're going to get 2,000 times $1.20. I think it's 2,400. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. 2,400. So far, that wasn't bad at all, was it? If you remember the formula, assessed value divided by 100 times the tax rate. Let me ramp it up one level, and then the one level I'm ramping up, it's really not going to be that difficult at all. Many of you have what's known as a budget mortgage, which will come up in chapter 14 when we start studying finance. In your budget mortgage, you make your payment to your principal and interest on your mortgage, but you also pay your taxes and insurance with your monthly payment. So oftentimes what they'll do is they will take your annual taxes, and they will every month they will collect how much? 112. 112. So this is what your annual taxes are. If I were to ask you what your monthly escrow payment is, how much would your monthly escrow to taxes be? Just divided by 12, and it would be 200. Now, every once in a while, a student reminds me that they don't know what the word escrow means. So let me just describe briefly what I mean by escrow. When I make my monthly mortgage payment, part of that money goes to the bank to pay for the money that I borrowed. But then part of it for my taxes and insurance for the following year, they go into an account. So that account is just building. Every month it's building by $200. So that at the end of a 12-month period, the bank can take the money out of that account and pay for my taxes. Now listen, they're not doing this for me. They're not doing this for my benefit. The bank is doing it to make sure the taxes and the insurance are paid. You say, why does the bank care whether the taxes or insurance are paid? Well, it's my property, but it's the bank's collateral. So they don't want to get behind a big tax bill. And insurance, why does the bank want to make sure my property insurance is paid? Because if the house burns down, they want their money, don't they? Matter of fact, if you were to ever look at your homeowner's insurance, you'd see that the primary beneficiary of your homeowner insurance is likely your lender if you owe much money on the property. So when I'm talking about escrow, that money's not helping you pay your loan down. That's going into an account to be held to pay something else at another time. Okay? That wasn't hard, was it? Okay? Let me ramp it up just a little bit, but again, this is not going to be difficult as well. If you were to run into a question, or if you were to just see a scenario, and it were to tell you that the assessed value for your land is $40,000, land, and for the improvements, the assessed value is $180,000 for the improvements. Basically the house and the outbuildings and stuff like that, fences, things like that. Okay, land is 40, improvements are 180. I have some good news for you. Real property taxes, land and improvements are taxed at the same rate. So what could I do? Add them together, save yourself a little bit of time, add them together. So your total assessed value is $220,000. So now we have that number. Okay? What if I were to tell you that your tax rate, you live inside the city limits, and so your county rate is 67 cents per 100, and your city rate, we'll call that the county. And then your city rate is 33 cents for the city. City and county use the same formula, so what could you do? Could you simply add them together? I think that's going to be the buck, right?
Yeah.
Now, once you get there, that's what we call a combined rate. When you look at your tax card, you may also see things like, we won't test you on this, but you can see on your tax card, sometimes you're taxed in a fire district or a school district or something like that. They just add that to that number. So do you see now we're right back where we were on the last problem? Okay, 220,000 divided by 100. Certainly that equals that. And then the tax rate now is $1. So your annual taxes for the year are $2,200. Good enough? Okay. You say, well, that wasn't complicated either. I'm liking this. Well, here's some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is that's not hard. That's just memorizing the formula. Assessed value divided by 100 times tax rate equals annual taxes. The bad news is we're never going to ask you this question on the exam. We're going to assume that you can do this to answer a much more challenging problem. Are you ready to see what that challenging problem is? I used to not break this out until week 4 because I didn't think students were ready for it. But you guys look ready. So I'm going to try this. Okay. Why might you need to know how to do the tax formula? Okay. What's today's date? Have any of you paid this year's taxes yet? Why not? You have not? You haven't paid your taxes yet? You can't have paid your taxes yet. What's that? Not this year's? I'm talking about real property taxes. I'm talking about real property taxes. See, a trick here. I'm not talking about to the IRS. I'm talking about your real property taxes. Let me rephrase the question. How many of you paid your real property taxes? And none of you? Because you don't have a tax bill yet. You couldn't pay it if you wanted to. Tax office wouldn't know what to do with the money. Okay? So, what would happen if you were to close today? Let's talk about that. I need some new numbers. Can I erase everything I've done so far? All right? Who's feeling brave? What, any volunteers for that? I'm assuming you're all holding up your hands. When I turn around, all right, Ebony, you're going to walk me through this.
Okay.
I'm going to start off easy though, okay? Since you volunteered, I'll start off easy. What's the assessed value of your home? Make up a number.
Oh, okay.
400,000. Yeah, nice home. Maybe we will come study at your house.
No, I just live in a expensive area.
400,000 is her assessed value. What's your tax rate? About 13.
About 13.
About 13. There we go. So her tax rate's $1.13. All right. So here's the deal. Somebody do this math for me real quickly. Times $1.13. How much? You might have calculated. 4520. Okay. 4520. That's what her annual tax bill is. All right. Now, Ebony is selling her house today. We are closing on her house today. What if I were to tell you that taxes are prorated at closing on a calendar year basis? Taxes are prorated at closing on a calendar year basis. First of all, can someone tell me what a calendar year is? Starts January 1st. When does it end? Okay, in this class, it ends December 30th because there is no December 31st in this class. When we do prorations for our settlement statements, we will do it under what's known as a banker year. A banker year is 12 months. Each month has 30 days. 12 months times 30 days is how many days? 360. So in this class, unless we tell you otherwise, your prorations will be done on a, what we call a banker's year, okay? 360 days. You're looking at me as if you do not trust me. You can trust. Constance just admits it. She said, I don't trust you. If we want you to use 365 days, we will tell you, but our prorations are done on 360. You know why they're done on 360? Because we're not testing you to see if you know the calendar. We're testing you to see if you know how to do the proration.